He had power, money, and everything except peace, until the confident woman he underestimated broke his walls. Welcome to True Soul Narratives, and where every story carries a heartbeat, love, betrayal, forgiveness, and the courage to start again. If this story resonates with you, subscribe and leave a like. Now, let's return to the story. The air in the Metropolitan Gallery auction room was thick, not just with the scent of aged canvas and polish, but with the unyielding arrogance of old money. Liam Vance stood at the front, a man whose presence commanded silence and submission. At 42, he was a master of acquisition, owning not just companies, but the very moments he inhabited. He was here to claim the final masterpiece in the Starlight Collection, a painting the world knew he was going to own. The bidding had soared, fueled by his cool, deliberate raises, crushing the spirit of every rival. He raised his paddle one last time, a final confident gesture signaling a number that should have ended the war. The auctioneer's gavel was already descending, and Liam felt the familiar, empty satisfaction of winning. But in that silent, arrogant second, a single, clear voice sliced through the tension. Stating a number that topped his own, Liam froze, the air draining from the room. He turned, his icy blue eyes scanning the crowd, searching for the foolish upstart who dared challenge him. She wasn't some rival collector. She was a woman named Avery Hayes, dressed simply, her only accessory a quiet, self-assured confidence that seemed completely out of place among the velvet and diamonds. She met his furious gaze, not with fear, but with an unflinching, steady look that held 1,000 untold stories. Liam Vance was used to owning everything, his empire, his time, his peace. But in that raw, exposed moment, he realized he didn't even own his own fury. He just lost a masterpiece to a woman he dismissed as a nobody, a loss that would crack his perfectly controlled world forever. The gavel stayed in the air, the silence in the room stretched and fractured. Liam Vance, the undisputed king of acquisition, stood utterly exposed, his control shattered by a single voice. He needed to reassert his dominance. Winning was his only known form of peace. He moved toward the woman, Avery Hayes, his steps radiating cold, surgical confidence. At 42, Liam's sharp suit and cold eyes were symbols of a brutal, isolating success, a man who had successfully acquired everything the world had to offer, yet whose soul remained utterly vacant. Acquisition was his religion, the only thing that filled the endless void where genuine peace should have lived. But Avery was different. She was 30-something, her posture practical, her eyes bright with a genuine warmth Liam hadn't seen in decades. She was an art restorer, a historian, someone whose life was driven by passion and preservation, not profit margins. Her confidence, Liam instantly recognized, wasn't manufactured by wealth. It was her fundamental nature, and it was the most dangerous weapon in the room. Liam approached her, expecting her to blush, stammer, or perhaps collapse under the weight of his name. He was ready to extend a generous offer, a simple transaction to fix this irritating public slight. "The painting is a fine choice," Liam said, his voice flat with forced politeness. "I'm prepared to offer you double your winning bid right now. Cash, wired immediately. You've made a spectacular return on investment." Avery looked at him, and her genuine smile, a smile he suddenly realized was unattached to any manipulation or desire, didn't fade. It was then she delivered the blow that shattered his arrogance. "It's not for sale, Mr. Vance," she replied, her voice firm and utterly unconcerned with the number of zeros on his bank statement. "Some things are just more valuable than your checkbook." Liam was stunned. His mind, trained for the predictable laws of economics, struggled to compute this defiance. His arrogance had never in his entire adult life been challenged so cleanly. The woman he had just dismissed as a nobody had not only stolen his painting, but she had just defined the entire emptiness of his life with one sentence. Can you believe her audacity? To a man like Liam Vance, who built his world on the very premise that everything had a price. What do you think her real motivation was? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this collision of arrogance and integrity, don't miss how Avery completely dismantles Liam's power in the next section. Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now to follow the full story of redemption and love. The silence following Avery's sharp refusal was more deafening than any applause. Liam Vance, whose whole identity was built on the premise that everything and everyone had a price, was left standing with his arrogance shattered like thin glass. But his pride had to give way to panic. The painting wasn't a luxury item. It was a crisis. Liam's highly prestigious family foundation was hosting a major charity gala in 3 weeks, and the center of the entire exhibition was meant to be the exact rare historical artifact that Avery Hayes had just acquired. Failing to secure the piece wasn't just a business loss. It was a failure that would disgrace the Vance name and jeopardize a charity his late mother had founded. He could not fail this. Driven by this rare, cold terror, Liam swallowed his pride and dispatched his assistant, Mark, to track Avery down. The location Mark provided was a world away from Liam's polished penthouses, a small, chaotic studio tucked into a working-class corner of the city. The humiliation was immediate. Stepping into Avery's studio was like entering a vibrant, dusty explosion of life, a sharp, dizzying contrast to Liam's sterile, structured world. He navigated around half-finished restoration projects, smelling turpentine and honest labor, feeling utterly out of place in his tailored suit. He found Avery meticulously working on a different piece, completely unfazed by his dramatic arrival. He skipped the pleasantries and laid out his desperation, proposing a new deal. "I need that piece for my family's event," Liam stated, trying to maintain authority. "It is central to the exhibition. If you help me authenticate it and prepare it for the event, I will pay your asking price, whatever it is. Name your fortune." Avery looked up, her confident eyes reading the desperation in his like a financial report. She saw the true stakes, not the painting, but the panic of a powerful man losing control. She saw his emptiness, and she refused the money. She didn't want his fortune. She wanted to shatter his routine. "I'll help you, Mr. Vance," Avery conceded, a subtle smirk playing on her lips. "But on my terms. I don't need your money. I need your time. You must report here to the studio for 1 hour every day. You will spend that hour working on whatever task I assign you, away from your phone, away from your office, and away from your arrogance." Liam scoffed. The idea was absurd, an insult to his schedule and his status. A billionaire playing assistant in a dusty studio? Yet with his family legacy hanging in the balance, he was trapped. He was forced to agree to the most humiliating contract of his career. Avery had turned the tables completely. She didn't want his wallet. She wanted to break his composure, his routine, and his very rigid view of the world. She had issued the challenge, and in that tiny, bustling studio, the battle for Liam Vance's soul had officially begun. He had no idea this small act of forced labor was actually her brilliant, slow-motion revenge. Liam Vance had agreed to the terms, but he certainly hadn't embraced them. His first few days at Avery's studio were a masterpiece of silent, simmering rage. He, the master of global finance, was now forced to sweep floors, catalog dusty restoration tools, and prepare canvases, tasks that left him covered in fine grit and utterly outside his element. His hands, accustomed only to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, felt crude and useless. He tried to reclaim control by barking orders at Avery, but her reaction was always the same, a calm, confident stare and an unwavering instruction. She was completely unmoved by his power, and it infuriated him. But the anger was slowly yielding to something else. Confusion. Very, in her easy, unhurried way, began to poke holes in his fortress. She didn't ask about his next acquisition. She asked about his life. Simple human questions. What was your mother like? What makes you laugh? Do you remember the last time you actually felt peace? He'd snap back, deflecting, but Avery noticed the way his eyes would go cold and distant, spotting the vast, emotional vacancy behind the surface of success. She saw the man, not the money. Then came the moment that truly broke the walls. They were preparing the central artifact, a fragile, ancient wooden tablet, for cleaning. Avery's movements were careful, precise, and she needed an equally steady hand. Liam was forced to stand shoulder to shoulder with her, his massive hands carefully supporting the brittle corners of the piece while she worked. He had to slow down, focus on the grain of the wood, on the whisper of her instructions. His high-octane brain, perpetually racing through stock market projections and corporate takeovers, was suddenly forced to exist only in the present, concentrating on the delicate task. In that quiet, shared moment of creation, guided by her expertise, Liam felt a flicker of something profoundly unfamiliar. It wasn't the thrill of winning. It was a simple, profound peace he hadn't experienced since childhood. His hands, usually controlling a vast empire, were now submitting to her, and the experience was terrifying and beautiful all at once. Just as this fragile connection began to solidify, Bree, seemingly out of nowhere, delivered the final calculated thrust of her needle. While dusting off a crate of old restoration supplies, she asked softly, "I read your father used to run Vance Construction before you pivoted to finance. What happened to that old company?" The question wasn't innocent. Liam's body went rigid. The flicker of peace vanished, replaced by cold, defensive steel. He snapped, his voice hard and low. "That is none of your business, Avery." The look in her eyes wasn't curiosity, it was knowing. She had quietly pulled on a thread from Liam's past, a dark secret he thought was buried forever. Avery knew something he didn't, and her agreement to help him was not a simple bet, but a brilliantly executed long-game plan. The stakes were no longer about a painting. They were about Liam's inherited integrity and his soul. If you're finding yourself invested in Liam's journey of forced redemption, take a second to hit the like button. It keeps these stories coming and helps us share more narratives about finding peace in the most unexpected places. The forced labor continued, but the texture of Liam's misery had shifted. He was still out of his element, still coated in fine dust, but the deep-seated rage was replaced by a bewildered curiosity. He was spending an hour a day in the studio, and soon it became 2, then 3. Not because of the ridiculous bet, but because he was starting to genuinely look forward to the scent of turpentine, the quiet patience of restoration, and most dangerous of all, Frey's genuine laughter. Their conflict, the friction of arrogance against integrity, was slowly but surely dissolving into a compelling, undeniable chemistry. Liam started seeing Avery not as the woman who defied him, but as the only person in his life who saw him completely. Flaws and all. The coldness in his eyes was melting, replaced by a cautious, fearful hope. But the world outside of Avery's studio was not so forgiving. David King, Liam's longtime rival, was sniffing around for weakness. David was a man fueled by petty jealousy and old grudges. He found out about Liam's daily studio sessions, twisting the humiliating situation into a weapon. David confronted Liam at a high-profile corporate dinner, mocking him in front of dozens of powerful peers. "How's the sabbatical, Liam? Playing games with a peasant who thinks dirt is art. You've lost your touch. Maybe you're finally realizing you're just your father's shadow, incapable of handling a real business. Just like he ruined that little construction firm." David sneered, letting a critical piece of information about Liam's father's forgotten business dealings drop like a stone. Liam's blood ran cold, but the sight of David's cruelty focused his fury. He left the dinner and went straight to the only place he felt real anymore, Avery's studio. "Who are you, Avery?" he demanded, the old arrogance surging back as a desperate defense mechanism. "Why did you ask about my father's business? Are you a spy for David? Were you using this whole charade to take me down?" Avery did not shrink. She put down her tools, her eyes sad but resolute, and finally revealed her truth, the true staggering motivation behind her actions. 15 years ago, Mr. Vance, your father's ruthless construction company crushed a small, honest woodworking business to acquire a property. "My father's business," she stated, her voice shaking slightly, but holding firm. "He lost everything. Everything except his integrity and his passion for art." She turned and placed her hand on the fragile historical artifact they were preparing for the gala. "This piece," she continued, "the one you were so desperate to acquire, it was originally commissioned for my family's collection, meant to be the cornerstone of our legacy, before your father ensured we had no legacy left. I didn't want your money, Liam. I wanted justice. I wanted recognition for what was lost. I wanted the arrogant son of that man to learn that not everything can be bought or crushed. The revelation was a physical blow. Liam was hit by a wave of crushing guilt and the staggering realization of his own inherited arrogance. His power, his vast money, his cold, flawless facade, it all dissolved into dust. He wasn't just working alongside a passionate, confident woman. He was facing a direct reflection of his own inherited emptiness and the injustices that paid for his opulent life. Avery Hayes was his conscience, his reckoning, and his only hope. The tension was a living thing that night, shimmering beneath the polished surface of the charity gala. Liam Vance stood beside the now restored antique, his expression carefully neutral, while Avery Hayes stood near him, her confidence radiating even in the formal, starched setting. The moment they had worked toward had arrived, but the air was poisoned. David King was there, lurking at the edges of the crowd, his smile predatory, ready to detonate the bomb of Liam's father's past business scandal. David represented the old world Liam was built on: cynicism, cruelty, and the belief that money could buy silence. Liam knew David's words, if spoken, could ruin his family's reputation instantly. The easy, arrogant Liam of months ago would have fought, negotiated, or threatened. But the man standing there now, changed by an hour a day with Avery, knew the only way to find peace was to face the truth. The moment came. Liam was introduced to present the centerpiece of the event. He walked toward the microphone, ignoring the icy glare of David King, and focused only on Avery. She stood slightly apart, her eyes silently asking him who he truly was: the heir to the arrogance, or the man who found peace in the studio dust. Liam didn't address the wealthy donors or the press. He spoke directly to her. "I came here tonight to present a piece of art that symbolizes legacy," he began, his voice clear and resonant across the vast ballroom. "But I have realized that the real legacy isn't the artifact. It's the truth behind it." He ignored the murmurs and the frantic gestures of his board members. He didn't fight or run. He publicly confessed his father's actions and the ruin he had caused Avery's family years ago. The confession: he announced that the artifact, which should have been their family's pride, would not be donated under the Vance name. Instead, it would be the cornerstone of a brand new foundation established in Avery Hayes' family name, a foundation dedicated to empowering and funding small, struggling artists. It was a complete, final surrender of pride and a monumental act of redemption. David King tried to interject, his voice sharp with malice, but Liam's truth had already disarmed the room. Liam looked directly into Avery's eyes, his own suddenly vulnerable, completely stripped of his defensive armor. He delivered the most honest words of his life, a statement of true emotional transformation. "I came here to buy peace. I realize tonight, peace isn't for sale. It's earned through integrity. Avery, you didn't just break my walls. You showed me the empty space inside them." The moment hung, silent and heavy, but then the crowd, moved not by money but by a rare, genuine moment of integrity, erupted in applause. David King was silenced, his weapon useless against an honest apology. Avery's eyes, wet with emotion, held a smile of pure respect and acceptance. It was the smile of true triumph, the moment the arrogant billionaire was finally, truly defeated by the honest woman he had underestimated. He had lost the painting, but he had won his soul. The ballroom still hummed with the shock of Liam's confession, but the atmosphere had transformed from stiff judgment to genuine, heartfelt respect. In the weeks that followed, the foundation announced by Liam became a reality. Justice was finally served, not by a courtroom, but by the courage of a changed heart. Avery Hayes stood at the helm of her family's restored legacy, the foundation thriving, dedicating itself to the very spirit of creation that Liam's father had tried to extinguish. And Liam Vance was there every step of the way, not as a donor or a director, but as a true partner. His time in the boardroom dwindled. His time in the dusty, chaotic, and peaceful studio increased. He was learning how to build something real, something that mattered, alongside the woman who had taught him the value of honesty. Their chemistry, born from intense conflict, had blossomed into a rare, quiet love. One afternoon, Liam walked into the studio and handed Avery a simple, non-material gift. It was a small, worn workbench, stained with age and history, salvaged from the abandoned shell of his father's old construction factory. It was a profound symbol. Uihon Diayabo. The old, corrupting foundation was gone, and the new one was built on this, on honesty and shared labor. Liam Vance learned that the greatest power isn't the ability to acquire, but the sheer, vulnerable courage to apologize. Avery taught him that confidence will always break down arrogance. This story reminds us that sometimes the person you think has the least to offer, the one standing simply outside your gilded circle, is the one who has everything you need to finally find the peace you've been chasing your whole life. What did you think of Liam and Avery's journey? Did Liam make the right decision to surrender his family's name for Avery's integrity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to True Soul Narratives for more heartwarming stories that redefine power and purpose.